Okay.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us this evening for our Reinventing Power panel here at Green New Deal, Virginia. My name is Matt Royer. I am the Sustainable Jobs lead here for the Green New Deal Virginia Coalition. I just want to start out with acknowledgement of the indigenous land that we currently inhabit right now. We have over a dozen tribes and native territories that we are here on here in Virginia, including the Monacan, the Manahoac, the Nanticoke, and the Piscataway. Starting off with just some Zoom norms, when you're on here, we just ask that you mute yourself. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box, and one of our moderators will take a note of that and then make sure that that gets questioned later on during our program. Right now, we're going to get into this expert panel here. This is basically an overview of our renewable energy industry here in Virginia, as well as the jobs in Virginia's renewable energy industry. They are currently growing faster than fossil fuel industry or other sectors. They're more diverse and better paying long-term jobs. And we will be discussing the steps and the path forward to securing those jobs in the industry by asking one of the folks who is currently employed in the solar industry. So with that, I want to start us off here by introducing our first speaker, Ivy Main. She is from the, let's see here, she will be going over the Virginia policies regarding jobs and storage in the renewable energy industry with the VCEA and Solar Freedom. So Ivy, please take yourself off mute and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I am the Renewable Energy Chair of the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club, and I write a blog called powerforthepeopleva.com that also appears in the Virginia Mercury. So some of you might be familiar with my writings. And I serve on our legislative committee, so I was pretty involved this legislative session in the suite of laws that got passed. And Natalie asked me to just kind of run through the laws that we passed and with a real lens on the job creation that will come out of them. So if the real Jolene could pull up my slideshow, we will get started.
1 second. Here you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I know you're all at least somewhat familiar with this remarkable suite of laws we passed this year that creates the framework for Virginia to transition to 100% carbon-free electricity. And one theme that does come up over and over again is the importance of creating jobs for people here in Virginia in energy efficiency, in solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, and energy storage. So we're going to look at these laws through the lens of job creation and specifically renewable energy. Next slide. These are the major pieces of the energy transition. A lot of other good bills were passed. I have a rundown of them on my blog, but we're going to focus particularly on renewable energy. Big part of the energy transition will be energy efficiency, and that's a huge job creator, and the two often go together. So sometimes you'll talk to companies that do both. Although the carbon reduction targets apply to all the utilities statewide, almost everything else we're talking about tonight is specific to Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power. So the rules are very different for the co-ops and munis. Next slide, please. So the first of the bills is having Virginia join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and it ratchets down the amount of carbon dioxide utilities can emit over time. So it doesn't require the utilities to build renewable energy, but the natural result of putting a utility on a carbon diet is that it puts pressure on them to use less fossil fuel and more carbon-free fuel. And again, you can see RGGI will be a direct job creator for energy efficiency because the money from the carbon allowance auctions will fund low-income efficiency programs. Next slide, please. So the VCEA uses the same auction allowance mechanism as the RGGI bill, but it extends it out to 2050. And then there's no allowances after 2050. So again, if you're taking emissions down to zero, you can only do that by building things that are carbon free, like wind and solar. Next slide. The VCEA requires closure of some of Dominion's coal and oil fueled plants in Virginia, as well as its biomass plants. It puts a 2-year moratorium on new fossil fuel plants, and it requires the SCC to consider the social cost of carbon when evaluating any new proposed fossil fuel plants. So here again, the effect on renewable energy is indirect, but it's clear. If you close a coal plant or you scrap plans for a gas plant, you probably have to build wind or solar to replace it. Next slide. So now we're getting to the part that's direct. The General Assembly doesn't just want carbon emissions to fall, it wants it to happen by our utilities building renewable energy here in Virginia. So the VCEA uses 3 tools at once to get to them. We have a renewable portfolio standard, which tells utilities to meet a percentage of their load with renewables. We have language telling the SCC that the General Assembly has decided renewable energy is in the public interest and it had better approve the projects. And then we have language telling Dominion and Appalachian Power to go out and build them here in Virginia. Next slide. So I mentioned that the first part of it is a renewable portfolio standard. It tells a utility that an escalating percentage of its electricity must come from certain types of renewable energy. And the RPS, in this case, applies only to the amount of electricity that is not nuclear. And that's how you get these apparent discrepancies between Dominion and Appalachian Power. Dominion's about 30% nuclear, so you kind of have to discount their requirement by 30%. And so whereas it looks like Dominion has a tougher job, actually it's a little harder for APCO. The RPS is really complicated, and the devil's in the details as to what qualifies as renewable. But after about 2025, there becomes a real pressure on them to build wind and solar in Virginia. A little, not so much until then. Unfortunately, it's kind of a slow rollout. Next slide, please. So in the public interest, the thing about an RPS is that the utilities don't have to own the facilities or buy the electricity from them. They just need to buy the renewable energy certificates. But the General Assembly really wants our utilities to build new wind and solar here. So the second way the VCEA favors renewables is by declaring Virginia wind, solar, and offshore wind in the public interest. And this does tell the State Corporation Commission that if these projects meet certain requirements for competitive procurement and other things, that they should approve them. So it does set these parameters for the SCC, but it sets a pretty ambitious goal in the near term for 16,100 megawatts of utility solar and onshore wind, including some rooftop solar. And 35% of all this has to be developed by third parties. So independent companies have an incentive to be here. Next slide. All right, now we're getting right to it. The third way to get renewables is to tell the utilities to go get them. The VCEA isn't leaving anything to chance. So Dominion and APCO actually have schedules to go out and build or buy or get the energy from Virginia wind or solar projects. And they have to issue annual RFPs over the next 15 years. Again, 35% of the projects must be third-party owned. Next slide. Offshore wind is treated separately in the VCEA for a couple of good reasons. One, it's more expensive right now. So if you just left it up to the market, it would be hard to get the first projects built, even if you know that later projects will be cheaper. This is just such a big industry that it needed this initial boost. And second, it's going to be a huge job creator. So the VCEA puts 5,200 megawatts of offshore wind in the public interest, and then pretty much guarantees that Dominion can go ahead and build half of that with the assurance of cost recovery. And here in the very terms of the offshore wind provisions, it says it wants job creation, the local job creation. And I think you'll hear later that the Northam administration is very focused on that. The rest of the offshore wind that's in there could come from the Kitty Hawk wind energy area in North Carolina, which will come to shore in Virginia Beach. And it'll use a lot of workers from Virginia as well. And longer term, we're going to need a lot more offshore wind. So we'll need the federal government to identify some more lease areas. I think I heard Bill Shobe say today at the energy conference that we were going to need 20 gigawatts of offshore wind. I mean, it's a huge number. So these jobs are just going to keep rolling along. Next slide, please. Storage. Okay, so storage isn't renewable energy, but they play well together. It helps integrate renewables into the grid. Many solar companies are incorporating solar into their work. So that also increases jobs. We have one of the most aggressive storage targets in the nation now. So that is a remarkable thing. Next slide. So the VCEA and the solar freedom bills overlap, and one of the critical provisions in both involves lifting a cap on third-party power purchase agreements and making them available to more customers in the territory of investor-owned utilities. The different rules, again, apply to rural electric cooperatives. PPAs are primarily a financing tool, and it's an especially important one for local governments, schools, and nonprofits. The PPAs make up a large percentage of the customer-sited solar in Virginia. So having them available is just hugely important for solar jobs. Until this year, we really could only use PPAs in Dominion territory, and there was a cap on the program that was reached in January. So Solar Freedom and the VCEA raised the caps and opened up the program to APCO and to Old Dominion Power, which is down in Southwest Virginia. We still have an issue in APCO territory because the contract by which APCO sells power to local governments still prohibits PPAs. APCO's promised that they'll be writing a new contract to allow them, but that hasn't happened yet. And meanwhile, there are solar projects that are ready to go that are being held up as a result. So if we can get past that, there are jobs in Southwest Virginia in solar. Next slide, please. The other DG freedoms, the net metering cap is increased to 6%. This is really important. It's really our only support for rooftop solar. And it's the program that makes it financially worthwhile for customers to install solar for their own use. So having that some certainty there for at least the next few years is just incredibly important for the rooftop solar market. I'm not going to go through these other changes. They all open up new markets for rooftop solar. So again, very important for job growth. There is one area of concern that is happening with the shared solar option for multifamily residential and a second shared solar program that applies to all customers, but with a particular focus on low-income customers. And unfortunately, what we've seen, that the SEC has proposed regulations that simply wouldn't allow these projects to get financed, and that, piling on costs, not telling you what the costs will be. So I think you'll hear more from Hannah Coman on that later, but that's a real concern. Next slide. Very quickly, we really don't have special incentives beyond net metering for rooftop solar. There is a small carve out in the VCEA for distributed resources. Unfortunately, Dominion tweaked it so that it could be filled with anaerobic digestion resources, which is pig waste. They've got to deal with Smithfield Foods. So that, the pig waste is going to be competing with rooftop solar for this little carve out. So I think, down the road, that's something we'll fix, but hopefully that doesn't hold things up too much. Next slide. A few other pieces of the energy transition. Under the VCEA, the Secretaries of Natural Resources, Commerce and Trade, and the SEC must report to the General Assembly on recommendations for achieving 100% carbon-free electric generation. So that's going to add planning for the co-ops and munis. And then we've got this the change to the Commonwealth energy policy that actually sets a goal of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. So that's moving the needle up on the electric sector. And then also net zero greenhouse gas emissions economy wide by 2045. So that brings in transportation, building sector, industrial, agricultural, and so that, that's going to mean the transition hits everything, and again, a big job creator. So I'm gonna stop there so that we have time to get into all the other great stuff. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ivy, for your perspective on that. Next, we're going to move to Hillary Bright, who comes to us from the Blue Green Alliance, and she'll be talking about the labor and green job, creating opportunities and protecting the environment. So Hillary, if you want to go ahead.
Great, thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. Hillary Bright with the Blue Green Alliance, coming to you from Pittsburgh. Previously in DC, but had the chance to go from home. And as it turns out, we're all working from home. So no loss, major loss there. For those of you who don't know, Blue Green Alliance takes the opportunity to unite America's largest labor unions and its most influential environmental organizations, really with the goal of solving today's environmental challenges in ways that create and maintain quality jobs and build a stronger, fairer economy. Now, obviously, I think everyone has a good sense of sort of the large number of jobs that are discussed when we're talking about creating renewable energy and deployment of renewables. A couple things I want to point out when we're talking about job creation. So not every job is created equally, and I think we can see that through our economy in a lot of sectors. And not all workers are treated the same, but there are some really great ways that we can improve the jobs that are being created. As we're, in particular, I'm gonna dive into one industry specifically, but across renewable energy. And I think a really important point that comes along with improving job quality and renewable energy, two major pieces there. One, the losses of jobs as we're transitioning away from fossil energy. A lot of those jobs have been unionized, are high-paying jobs. And additionally, then communities of color, low-income communities have traditionally been sort of left out of the energy space. By creating high-quality jobs, you're really presenting a very realistic future to shift workers into the fossil fuel industry into renewable energy, as well as expanding those opportunities for communities who have just traditionally been left out of this space and unfortunately have suffered sort of the higher burden of fossil energy and sort of the pollution that is associated with some of these industries. So having said that, I want to just take a second to sort of dive in to Virginia, and Ivy laid out so well the tremendous, growth and goal of offshore wind that has been committed to by the state of 5,200 megawatts. Really starting to put Virginia up in the top states of procurement with New York and New Jersey. Just huge numbers we're seeing, which really starts to, I think, solidify this industry as a real economic proposition and has gained a lot of attention in good ways. And as I've seen this industry over the past several years really begin to take hold and move, I'm seeing some of the best opportunities for both unionization, but high job quality that I've seen sort of in the 13 years or more that I've been doing green jobs work. There's just a tremendous opportunity here. And I think, one thing, you'll hear oftentimes is, oh, if we have to do too many studies for the environment, it gets expensive. Oh, if we do unions or if we look at high paying jobs, it's going to cut into the cost and things associated with offshore wind. One important point that I really want to point out that Ivy mentioned, which I think is just really great to remember, is that in particular for the first half of those projects, the utility is allowed to get cost recovery. Right. So as we are launching into this new industry, let's make sure that we're doing this right from the start. Let's set the precedent that we want the most responsibly developed projects when it comes to our environment. We want the most responsible projects when it comes to driving economic development and creating those jobs that are high quality. We have that opportunity in front of us right now, maybe like we've never had. And Virginia can play a leading role in being able to do that. So, what makes offshore wind jobs potentially heading down a path of higher quality than some other jobs? Just to take one step in back, I want to just give a couple of the sort of give you the scale. And Ivy laid out sort of the number of megawatts we're talking about here. But for instance, the National Renewable Energy Lab states that Atlantic coast states could create $200 billion in new economic opportunity with over 43,000 permanent high-paying jobs only by developing 54 gigawatts of the potential of over 1,200 gigawatts that we have in offshore wind. So this is not a small industry. This is a massive opportunity. So if we truly want to maximize and fulfill the potential of offshore wind projects, it's critical that they're built by skilled labor in trades like utility workers, electricians, iron workers, operating engineers, and that they're paid family sustaining wages. These agreements that we're really looking to our developers and to our states for leadership should include ports, installation, operation, maintenance, and a key part that we're just sort of starting to scratch the surface of, but Virginia has been, I think, leading the way in the conversation, is to build a robust domestic supply chain with materials manufactured here in the United States, for instance, by a union like the United Steelworkers. So how do we begin kind of creating these quality jobs or continue on this path that is starting to move? So by leveraging state procurement, the solicitation and RFP processes, legislation, cases in front of the utility commissions, tax credits, all of those present opportunities to lay the groundwork and set the rules of how we want to see this industry develop and who we want to see be able to take advantage of the benefits of this industry, both from the clean renewable energy side and less pollution, but also in the job creation side. So sort of three quick pieces I'm going to just run down that are kind of traditional or key opportunities in the quality job creation piece. So the first are project labor agreements, which are being discussed widely throughout the industry. So a project labor agreement is a collective bargaining agreement that covers all of the craft workers on the construction project. So all of those folks that I named, sort of everyone comes together with the company that's building the project and sets guidance and sort of minimal and mutual expectations for large projects. Ultimately, for trade unions and most building trades union, this is sort of the gold standard of how to establish a really strong, well-built project that ultimately benefits the community and the workers as much as it will sort of the impact that we have to reduce greenhouse gases and climate change. Another opportunity that is really important when it comes to manufacturing unions, as well as really getting community involvement, are community benefits agreements. So this really helps to set the agreement between the community and the company to, for instance, recognize the ability to organize. They're called labor peace agreements. So that if you have a manufacturer, a union has the opportunity to potentially organize that membership, as well as local hire, even things like affordable housing. So you really, when you're looking at your community benefits agreements, you have an opportunity to bring a large coalition together to figure out literally, how does this industry best impact our community? How do we get out of this economic growth what we see for our community? And lastly, another one that a lot of folks I'm sure have heard, prevailing wage, right? So prevailing wage establishes a wage floor for each occupation that's going to be doing work. And this really helps to prevent companies from putting in bids that have extremely low wages, which we will hear oftentimes, right? People say all the times that the wages for workers that's what's driving up the cost in prices. And so they cut those wages. And oftentimes then you run into the risk of maybe not having skilled labor. And you're obviously then at that point not sort of creating the jobs that families can sustain themselves on. And I think as we're creating this just tremendous opportunity in addressing climate with creative and intelligent economic growth, ideas here, these are the kind of pieces we really want to see build out in this industry, so that we can, specifically in times of COVID, we've seen tremendous impact on the economy. This industry presents a huge opportunity, not only for climate, not only for job creation, but job creation in a time when people are going to be very in need of getting back to work when we get to that point and can do it safely. So having said all of that, in closing, I just want to acknowledge one, the importance of renewable energy deployment, both as a key component to addressing climate change, but also as this economic driver and job creator. I think by working with like all of the folks like you all on the phone and coalitions, large voices of labor unions, environmental organizations, community, environmental justice, we really have the opportunity to not only just deploy the renewables, but to do it in a way that benefits us in a whole host of ways. And I think that is one of the huge lessons learned for renewable energy broadly. We have this opportunity. Let's really harness it and make it the best that we can moving forward. Really appreciate talking with you all and being here. Thanks so much, Matt. Turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Hillary. I think that was a great overview of what we're looking for, in terms of the marrying of labor and renewable energy. So, that's actually a great lead into what I kind of want to talk about here, which is from the perspective of the sustainable jobs group here within the Green New Deal coalition, kind of along the same lines of what Hillary just went over. We should not only be focusing on ensuring the creation of these renewable jobs, but ensuring that they are good paying union jobs that meet or exceed the pay and benefits of the fossil fuel jobs that they are replacing. Ensuring that a just transition as well between the old energy jobs and the new energy jobs in the future, for the sustainable energy jobs that we're talking about right now. That is also a key component to what we're talking about when we're talking about how we will be, training these folks from going from a coal mining job or a fossil fuel job to a renewable energy job, and ensuring that there is either a financial fund that can cover that the cost that they would be losing from the paychecks that they're getting cut while they transition. And one of those ways that you can cover that is by giving training through a union, because in most trade unions, the workers actually get paid for the 2 years that they are in apprenticeships, getting trained for these jobs that we're working on. We had begun this process of training workers to transition over to the renewable energy sector. However, the empty promises of the Trump administration deterred them from doing so. As we have seen with Trump's failed promises to coal and oil industries, jobs are being obliterated, plants are being closed down, people are losing jobs left and right. And we can create a sustainable career path for these workers by creating these renewable energy jobs to be good union jobs. And the first step here in Virginia to do that is repealing right to work laws. Virginia is still ranked dead last for workers' rights here in the United States. I don't care what our business ranking is. We are 51st behind all other 50 states in the District of Columbia when it comes to how we treat our workforce. And the so-called right to work laws here in Virginia create an incredibly hostile environment for workers' rights. According to the Economic Policy Institute, wages in right to work states are 3.1% lower than in non-right to work states. Roughly translated, that's the difference between a $24 per hour job and a $20 or $21 per hour job in right to work states, or about $1,500 to $1,600 lower in annual wages for a typical full-time, full-year worker. Most importantly, the right to work laws prohibit unions from effectively collecting union dues, which bankrupt unions, and in doing so significantly limit their ability to bargain effectively. And without that ability for workers to effectively bargain, wages are cut, benefits are slashed, workers have less power to protect themselves from unethical business practices like wage theft, misclassification of workers, and unsafe workplace practices. If we want to invest in sustainable job growth, we need to invest in our workers' ability to organize and bargain. Instead of workers having to rely on their own ability to negotiate contracts, the workers will rely on these unions and the locals to negotiate those same contracts. and therefore give more time to the workers to focus on the project itself. In some cases, developers will often, treat workers as independent contractors and cut them off once the project is ended. And under a union model, the workers move on from one project to another, continuing that sustained career path for the workers rather than just have a one and done project for each project. So what we're doing here in Virginia, on top of repealing that right to work law, is trying to kind of, what Hillary just talked about, which was implementing project labor agreements across all development projects, and reinstating proffers or community benefit agreements, which Hillary just also went over, that have been scaled back here in Virginia over the past 10 years. Now, how does that apply to the Green New Deal as a whole? Well, for unions in the long run, what is the point of a good job if there's no longer a home to come home to, right? Right now, the renewable energy sector is growing within the United States. The rate of growth in the renewable energy sector doubled from 2018 to 2019, growing from 3% year over year to 6% in the year following. And we know if we need to combat climate change, these numbers will only increase, and we must make sure that these jobs are not only effective in combating climate change, but also paying the human element behind it what they are worth. Unions will give our workers the necessary training that they can use to create the long-lasting infrastructure to support the influx of this clean energy that's coming in. And it is proven that when projects are built with union labor, they are under budget, on time, and require very little maintenance and repair in the future, which will save us a ton of money for the taxpayer. We are also, in addition to this, also in desperate need of the rebuilding of our infrastructure, including for transportation, rural broadband connectivity, and access to clean water. So all of these jobs in this job training, not only does it apply to the renewable energy sector, but it will also apply under that Green New Deal model to all of that infrastructure that we are trying to rebuild here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that all being said, that was sort of the overview of what is going on with the job creation. Now we kind of want to go into the industry perspective of what we have going on. So first we have Eileen Woll, who will be talking about offshore wind jobs in the Hampton Roads area. So Eileen, if you want to take it away.
Sure, thank you. My name is Eileen Woll, and I'm the Offshore Energy Program Director with the Sierra Club here in Virginia. And for those of you who watched the movie Reinventing Power, I think what the exciting vignette that they had was, of course, the Block Island. Block Island was the first project in American waters. It, however, went into state waters. So, but the story in Virginia is, that we have offshore wind is happening here in Virginia, and it's happening now. In June this year, Virginia became the first in the nation to stand offshore wind turbines in federal waters. With the Virginia Coastal Offshore Wind Project, the larger one, Virginia is also in line to be home to the nation's largest offshore wind project, a project that will bring 2,600 megawatts of clean energy, powering about 650,000 homes by 2026. So we know that offshore wind is here, and it is now. So we now must ensure that offshore wind is done right. And by that, I mean, meaning it is brought online in a way that is fair and equitable and beneficial for all Virginians. So why does offshore wind matter and what makes it so special? I do want to point out that Virginia cannot meet 100% of its clean energy goals without offshore wind. A sizable amount, as Ivy indicated earlier today on the Virginia Clean Energy Conference, there was a gentleman from UVA who said that it could be as high as 20 to 30 gigawatts that we need to have in order to meet those 100% goals. So sizable portion of it needs to come from offshore wind. And it is there. The wind resource along the Atlantic coast has enough power to supply the entire electric demand of the United States. There are currently over 26,000 megawatts or 26 gigawatts of offshore wind projects in the planning and development stages along the Atlantic. That's enough to power over 15 million homes. So this is definitely America's new energy frontier, and Virginia absolutely can and must be a part of it. Now we know, we talked about it a number of times, it's the number one thing that offshore wind creates thousands of jobs. These are career length, family supporting jobs for Virginians. Just in retrospect, we also know that according to the Virginia Department of Health, almost 1 million Virginia residents live below the federal poverty level. And we do believe that with offshore wind, Virginia can help confront some of that income inequality by creating more and higher paying jobs for its residents. Researchers here in Virginia do estimate that with the full build out of the offshore wind industry, over 14,000 jobs can be created. These are, like I said, high paying, local, long-term jobs that will employ a broad array of Virginians, including people in low-income communities, high school grads, college grads, returning citizens, and veterans that are transitioning out of the civilian workforce. And in addition to the tremendous job opportunities, offshore wind made and constructed with American parts and labor will also deliver significant cost savings. Globally, offshore wind, the costs have plunged 32% in the past year, and the industry experts anticipate even further price drops as the U.S. starts to build its own manufacturing and supply chain, and instead of importing those European parts, those parts for offshore wind turbines from Europe. And one thing I do want to point out, it's a fun fact to know, but any one wind turbine is made up of 8,000 parts. So that does translate to a lot of manufacturing. It's not just the big stuff that the blades or the foundations or the monopoles. These there are a lot of parts, 8,000 parts in total. So this is an industry, a manufacturing industry. Sure, a lot of the larger stuff does need to be near the coast because it is transported and staged, has to be near the coast. But certainly any of those other parts can be manufactured anywhere. Some of the assets I'll just quickly touch on that really support Virginia as being a powerhouse for or a hub for offshore wind. Our asset list in Hampton Roads especially is an ideal place because of our deep water harbor. We also have no restrictions to vessel heights, and we also have here in the nation's largest shipbuilding industry, and there's a lot of parallels, especially job-wise, between the shipbuilding industry, the maritime industry, and what the jobs will be for offshore wind. So a lot of parallels there. And then we also have a lot of port infrastructure. We also have a very robust network of community colleges and world-class universities that can train and be involved with the labor market. But I think, tops on the list is the tremendously large coalition of offshore wind supporters that have been working since at least 2009. So for over a decade to iron out all the conflicts and to make it happen for Virginia. So we just now need to just really turn our attention right now to these job opportunities and to making sure that we're getting Virginians into these educational and training programs and do it as quickly and as organized as possible. The economic development folks that are trying to attract, because it is actually, after all, the economic development attracting manufacturers to Virginia shores that help create the jobs. So we can't put our cart before the horse. Before we can have the jobs, we have to have the manufacturers here. And as Ivy pointed out, with the VCEA, we did get some very large commitments to offshore wind. And indeed, it is that commitment to offshore wind that prompted Siemens Gamesa, who is the world's largest offshore wind turbine manufacturer, to announce that they were seriously taking an interest in setting up a manufacturing facility in Virginia. So really, really exciting stuff. So the economic development guys are doing their job, but it really is now very important for us to seal the deal and make sure that we are getting our ducks in a row as far as getting the workforce ready for this industry, getting folks into the training programs, and really excited to really work in that. There's a lot of folks. We had an announcement last week with that Governor Northam had made that they are he announced creation of a Mid-Atlantic Wind Training Alliance, which is a trade school, the Centura College, and the Maritime Industry Academy, and the new college out in Martinsville, coming together. And there will be lots more organizations and schools that are going to be involved with that, and training programs. DMME is committed to organizing this initiative to get the word out, and to provide the landing page, if you will, for anybody wanting to consider an offshore wind career path and to see exactly what kind of training programs. So they've run a list of the classes that are available in the community colleges, in the trades, and then it's also identified, especially with this training initiative or training alliance, what needs to happen, what kind of additional certificates need to happen. So those are all coming together very, very well. It's very, very important. And we also need to promote those opportunities to the community. Yeah, that's, be welcome any of your questions, but I do have later in the agenda where a call to action. It is important right now, our call to action for the governor to create an offshore wind workforce development plan. It's time to strategize and put all these different ideas that folks have as far as recruiting the workforce and training the workforce, to get it on paper and get it more strategic as far as the timeline, and trying to match it up with when manufacturers can be coming on and when those contracts will be coming in for all those different parts to be developed.
All right. Thanks so much, Eileen. Really appreciate your perspective on what's going on with the offshore wind development. Next, we will be hearing from Tyson Utt, who works with Apex Clean Energy, talking about utility scale solar and onshore wind in Virginia. So Tyson, if you want to unmute.
I think I am. Great. All right. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that introduction, and really glad to be with you all this evening. It is really it's exciting how much is happening, in the clean energy space, with renewables, with energy efficiency, just so much that is really, I think having not only the environmental impacts that I know we're all focused on, but also the economic development impacts and the jobs that come with that. So this is an exciting topic, and it's nice to be able to be contributing to the space. At the same time, it's also nice to help people understand what the opportunities are to be working within the clean energy space, and how to find jobs and career paths that can be really quite fulfilling, I think. In my at this point 15 years working within the wind and solar industry, I really have found that so many people find their way into the industry from a environmental passion and a commitment to a career that's going to have a positive, lasting impact on the environment. And I think that we as an industry have also done quite a good job of retaining that core and that value set as we've grown. We certainly these days are you can consider it mainstream energy. I mean, we are needing to compete on cost and on availability and all the other factors that are important to customers on the electricity that we're generating. And it's just nice to understand how that comes with an environmental component to it. If I could spend just a second, kind of talk a little bit about my own story and how, I was born and raised in Virginia, like I imagine many folks on this call are. And for me, it really started when I was at school at James Madison University, and I was taking classes that were geared towards thermodynamics, how to design or build heat exchange power plants. And I remember going to the professor and explaining how, this was fascinating work. I love the intricacies of it. But I was curious, what other options are there? And, he suggested that they were thinking about getting a group together to focus on wind at the time, and thought that I should join that group. And from there, I really just became obsessed with the possibilities of the technology, both wind and solar. But I really was always driven by this question of, is this viable? Is this going to work? And now, I can tell you these years later, it absolutely is. I think that we're pointing to the improvements in the technology. not just from an efficiency standpoint, but also like from a cost standpoint and an economic impact perspective. So, kind of fast forward to today, just to give like a few pieces of background information on Apex, who we are and what we're about, and some of the efforts that we're underway here in Virginia. We are a really mission-driven company, and the focus is to accelerate the shift to clean energy. And because we're a Virginia-based company, we're very focused on making sure we're doing that work here in Virginia as well. We do build projects across the country, but it's exciting to see Virginia, really now catching steam and getting up to speed with the rest of the states that have really led the way to date. And at this point, we've been able to permit 500 megawatts worth of projects across 5 different counties in Virginia, both onshore wind and utility scale solar. And those projects are going to provide 100,000 homes worth of electricity each year, and $30 million worth of local and state taxes, and probably 750 or so full-time equivalent construction jobs. And so, we kind of see it as like our part to really make sure that we are developing these projects responsibly and trying to create the opportunities for those investments, and have that create economic development job opportunities for folks. I know I have a limited amount of time, so I wanted to mention real quickly also that there are a couple of really great resources within the Commonwealth already. One effort that the industry has been very involved in is called SHINE. It's the Solar Hands-On Skills Initiative that the Southside Community College, and it's a great program for helping folks who want to get into installing solar panels at utility scale projects or distributed projects. And also has some scholarship programs and things that are of opportunity as well. So just wanted to mention that, and happy to talk more about it. So thanks for the time, and glad to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tyson. Go Dukes, by the way. Thank you for giving us the perspective from the development side of things. Next, we will be hearing from Aaron Sutch. I think I pronounced that correctly, hopefully. Talking about distributed solar and storage here in Virginia. So Aaron, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks. Does everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, I really appreciate being on this panel and all the excellent information that was shared earlier. I'm going to speak a little bit from a personal perspective and then from a professional perspective regarding our transition and jobs. If you're not familiar with our work, I'm the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director for Solar United Neighbors. Solar United Neighbors is a nonprofit organization that helps communities go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. So my personal story is that earlier this spring, I was surfing out at Croatan Beach in Virginia Beach, which I really love to do. And I saw a rig out in the water, and I asked somebody, I said, well, what was that? Because I was hoping it wasn't related to oil. And they said, well, that's where they're surveying the ocean floor for the cable, for the transmission cable for the wind energy plant. And it brought a big smile to my face, and I posted it on Facebook. And I'm just really excited to see all the larger scale wind and solar energy come on, because we're going to need that large utility scale in order to shift to a full transition to renewables. But in speaking to a personal, or actually a professional side, Solar United Neighbors is firmly in the field of distributed generation. And distributed generation, you could think of, is generation through, say, solar panels on the roof of your house or a small wind turbine, but it's generation that serves, or that produces energy or power very near where it's consumed. So it stays local. A good analogy is it's like growing tomatoes in your garden. You're going to be eating those tomatoes at your house, maybe giving a few to your neighbors. That's really what distributed generation is. And what we like to say is that it has a tremendous impact, actually an outsized impact, in jobs, resiliency, and consumer benefits. And I'm going to hopefully explain why that talking point has the added virtue of being true. So don't confuse smaller scale with smaller impact. So focusing on jobs, the solar industry, along with wind, is creating good, well-paying jobs, as the previous panelists mentioned. Solar industry, as far as renewables, employs the most, at about 374,000 jobs here in the United States. Of that percentage, a majority of those jobs are actually in distributed generation. About 70 to 80% of those solar jobs are in distributed generation. That means a company employing people to put solar panels on a house or a school or a church. But it's also not just putting panels on a house. Those companies employ a lot of different types of positions. So it takes a lot of people to administrate putting those panels on distributed sites. It's administration, it's ordering, supply chain, it's consumer relations, which is another way of saying if there's a problem, somebody's going to go out and troubleshoot it or deal with somebody. And here in Virginia, that data point tracks what we see in Virginia, in that a majority of Virginia's solar jobs are in distributed generation, about 70%. So, don't confuse the smaller scale with a smaller impact, because, those DG jobs are well-paying, and they're well-paying, and, they're numerous. My personal experience is that we've seen a lot of solar companies grow from literally 5 guys in a pickup truck to employing over 30 or 40 people. But there's also the added benefit in resiliency. And that's one thing that's coming to the fore. And what we've seen in our work in Florida, and actually a small pilot in Puerto Rico, is that distributed energy, solar or wind, coupled with battery storage, is the best way to keep the lights on. And that's because, as by definition, that energy stays on the distribution system at or near the point of where it's used. So if you don't have to rely on transmission lines or a centralized grid failure like we're seeing in California, in fact, you're a little island of power. It's called islanding. So really, coupling distributed resources with energy storage has the added benefit of resiliency, is the best way to keep the lights on. And then lastly, I'll just say that it's unique in that it's able to help reduce energy burden along with energy efficiency. So somebody that goes solar or employs some small distributed generation is hedging against the future prices of electricity increases. They're reducing their energy burden with that on-site generation. And then lastly, it enables participation in the energy system. You could think of it like this. Solar panels on your roof is as valuable as your cell phone, because it's something that you can touch and that you can control. And we're starting to see a centralized paradigm of energy generation change to a two-way participatory energy system. So these distributed resources that are dispatched or that are controlled by consumers can actually benefit the grid. So I'll stop there and just say that I don't want to draw a false dichotomy that it's an either or, because there's a complement between the smaller scale and the larger scale. So I'm excited to see it all. And if there's any questions, happy to answer them later in the broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That's great to hear more about that part of the solar industry. Finally, our last panelist here is Hannah Coman, who will be talking about solar in the Southwest Virginia region, coal country, and shared community solar. She is from Apex Clean Energy, just as Tyson was earlier. So thank you, Hannah, for being here, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. So my name is Hannah Coman. I'm Associate General Counsel at Apex Clean Energy. In this role, I negotiate power purchase agreements, which Ivy had mentioned earlier today, and I work with our business development folks on emerging business lines. I've only been at Apex for about 8 weeks. Before that, I was the Virginia Solar Attorney for the Southern Environmental Law Center, where I represented environmental organizations and intervened before the State Corporation Commission and advocated for stronger, more effective renewable energy policy. So as you can see, I've really dedicated my career to working on these issues and addressing climate change through renewable energy. I'm also the chair of the Clean Energy Advisory Board. The Clean Energy Advisory Board was created by the Virginia General Assembly in 2019, and the purpose is to expand access to cost-effective clean energy for low and moderate income Virginians across the Commonwealth. And that includes people in single-family homes and multifamily homes, and in all areas that are economically disadvantaged. So the board has really been focused on developing a rebate and loan program for solar for low to moderate income customers. And we're working hard to develop the rules and for the application process and really trying to figure out how to make this type of program Virginia specific. But that type of rebate or loan program would really be best for people that live in single family homes. And that leaves a lot of people out of the equation, people that rent, people that live in multifamily homes, apartment buildings, or people who have roofs that couldn't structurally hold solar, are old, are shaded. There's a lot of people that could be left out. So the other thing that we're thinking about is the subscription model. So that's what I want to talk about today. Because when I think about jobs, I really think about trying to make the pie bigger. How do we increase the different types of markets that we can be in and create more and more jobs? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the subscription models here in Virginia and give a little history on that. And I'm also going to highlight some of the opportunities and some of the things that are happening right now in Southwest Virginia. So in 2017, community solar legislation was passed in Virginia. And to take a step back, subscription models are where you don't have to have the solar on your own roof or on your own property. You can just sign up and say, I want to offset my energy usage or a portion of my energy usage with renewable energy. And it's just more like a click of a button. And so it's called community solar, and it's also called shared solar here. So community solar legislation passed in 2017, and that legislation was written in such a way where where it would be a premium product. There would be you could sign up for it, but there would be no way to save money to do so. And the facilities of solar would be owned by the utility. So that passed in 2017. Dominion proposed a program. That program was approved. APCO has never proposed a program, but this program is still not open for customers to sign up for. And my understanding is that they found it to be unfinanceable. I mean, who is going to sign up for something that's a premium product? That's the thinking right now. So 3-4 years later, it's still not open for people to sign up for. So this year, 2020, 2 other pieces of legislation passed, and there's 2 different shared solar programs now. One is, I'll just refer to as Dominion Shared Solar, and that is for any Dominion customer to sign up for. There's supposed to be a low to moderate income customer portion of it, where 30% of the program should be subscribers that are low to moderate income customers, and their rates would be likely lower, and how the economics would work. And then there's a program called the Multifamily Shared Solar Program, and that would be for customers in Dominion's territory and Old Dominion Power's territory, which is this far southwestern tip. The law in both of those cases is a great opportunity for Virginia. It's a great opportunity for people to be able to sign up. The energy should be cheaper, there should be cost savings, and it should also open up this brand new market for solar developers to build more solar and create more jobs. Problem right now is that the proposed regulations from the State Corporation Commission would really destroy the economic viability of this. And I mentioned this before. I think we'll share it later if approved, but I have kind of a few bullet points on each of the programs about what the flaws are, and actually how the regulations don't adhere to the legislation or the statute, and that needs to be fixed. And they're also very small programs, only about 150 megawatts. So this is just a really small pilot program that already may get destroyed and go the same way as community solar, which would be it would be a big step back for Virginia. So I know we're running out of time, but I just want to quickly mention the exciting stuff that's happening in Southwest Virginia. There's a really great group down there called the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia that I worked closely with while I was at the Southern Environmental Law Center. And they are working on raising awareness with how energy policies are impacting their region. So down there in Southwest Virginia, they have APCO and they have Old Dominion Power. And some of the programs that Dominion has to file and the rules Dominion has to follow, APCO and Old Dominion Power don't have to do. For example, there are no energy efficiency programs down in Old Dominion Power's territory. And it's people that live in a lot of RV parks, and there's no opportunity to make them more energy efficient. At a reasonable cost. So Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia is doing great work down there. They're teaming up with Secure Futures. They're opening up a solar business down there. They're working with the community colleges, Mountain Valley Community College. And you should check out, it's called Securing Solar for Southwest Virginia. It's a great program. And Sun Tribe is also down there building solar on abandoned mine lands for the Mineral Gap Data Center. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening down there and a lot of hope. So I'm going to stop right there and let you take over, Matt. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you, Hannah, for all that. We will have some questions coming up, so we'll just circle back to all of our panelists. But before that, we have someone with us here who actually works in this space. Monty is a employee with Solar, and I wanted to see if you could just give us a kind of an overview of what it's like to be a worker in this space and how he sort of came to be involved in solar energy. So take it away, Monty.
Thank you, sir. I hope you're hearing me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, I am Monty. So I'm an installer for Ipsen Solar. At this point, I'm a crew lead. I have more of a leadership position. I started less than a year ago installing solar panels. It's been quite a ride. I had no idea what that was before January of this year. I studied criminal justice and I worked in different fields, such as I'm a tour guide. I have a boutique touring company in Washington, D.C. And so, but then things were changing quick and I needed a different path. And in the last 2 years, I've been looking for a lot of things, but it's been hard for me to focus and find something that I can make an impact as well as make a living. In addition to what I do as a hobby at this point. So I had a friend who introduced me to solar industry. He's been working for a while. I told him that I might need a job, and he said, "Hey, we are hiring." And I was glad to join as a lower position because I had no idea of what to expect. But the promise was that if I'm open to learning, there is a path and I will grow. And that came to be true. I started as a solar installer with a basic wage, I guess, for what is in solar industry in Virginia. And then at this point, 8 to 9 months later, I have a leadership position and I have a significant raise on my paycheck. So it's been quite interesting and motivating for me to see all of this growth and everything, especially these days when most of the industries are laying off people. We have seen a Tyson spraying higher in last, since I started, really, they're still hiring constantly.
That's great to hear. What what kind of training, I guess, did you have to go through? I know you kind of talked about how you came from one industry into the next. I know that that often when it comes to some of these installation jobs in the energy sector, it requires a lot of intense training. What did that look like for you over the course of being here within Epson Solar?
Well, I thought that was going to be the challenge for me because I never installed too many things in my life. So, but I am a hands-on person. And so I had no idea how the installation process works. One thing that it's up high in the roof there, and most of the people don't want to look up high there. And so that was my first concern was, and so my friend asked me, are you okay with heights? I said, yeah, I'm fine with heights. I'll try. And so once I got there and the training process was on the field, and it's a really simple process. There are not too many steps because of the new technology and new advances on solar industry and on new parts and new. The training. It's really not that hard. It's not like a typical probably construction work. It's a little bit different. As long as you're comfortable with heights, I'm sure you can adjust up there and learn very quick if you want to, and gain very quick.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that's like with the heights and everything along those lines. But just one last question for you. With all that being said, what do you see as sort of your forward career path within within the solar energy industry? Do you think that you'll be continuing on through all of this, and if so, what do you see forward from here?
I absolutely will. There's no question. I'm very excited, and motivation for me comes from all sides. Especially, I come from a developing country. I came to the United States in 2006, so I know what it means not to have sustainable energy that destroys economies, destroys nations. And so the new world with climate change and everything, I think we have no choice. And I personally, I'm very excited and very motivated. And my job now is to motivate other people and educate other people the way I was educated to those from Epson Solar and others. So to carry on this mission. And we see a growth constantly through, we see a big demand. So I'm sure that we have to grow and find new ways and new positions.
Yeah,
I hope I answered your question.
No, you definitely did. Thank you so much, Monty. It's great to hear from someone who is in it on a day-to-day basis. Just what it's like and where we're at with the industry as a whole. So thank you for being on. Yeah, of course. Kind of just shifting gears before we get into the rest of our QA section here. Just want to go through some calls to action here. Starting with myself. The first thing with all of these things that we've been hearing, which have been great. The best thing that we can do is to call on our legislators and our local leaders to take action on these issues, and that also starts with talking with your friends and family, making sure that they know what is at stake here and what is at play with all of these renewable energy jobs that are being created. And if there are folks who are looking, some similar to what Monty just said, who are looking to be employed, this might be the great opportunity that they see, because as we've been talking about, this industry is growing significantly. So if we continue to make sure that this is in the public conversation, we will be seeing a much better path forward. I just want to call on a few other folks to talk about some of their calls to action, starting with Eileen. Any policy next steps that you want to talk about before we get into our questions?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit when I spoke before. We have an action alert to Governor Northam telling him that asking him to develop a plan for offshore wind jobs. I'll drop that link in the chat box, but not a big ask, but one that I say it's not a big ask because he had originally said that he wanted to see a clean energy workforce development plan in EO 43, Executive 43. But that didn't come to be for a number of reasons. So we're asking him to renew that interest and to definitely make a point of asking his administration to develop it. Because like I said, we need that strategy. So I'll drop that into the link. If you all can follow up with sending that message to him and, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Eileen. Real quick, Hannah, do you have anything next steps wise, policy agenda that you want to go over with your calls to action?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just really briefly, the State Corporation Commission is receiving comments right now on the proposed shared solar regulations. And I believe I sent Natalie some info on that, if we can share that maybe. Thank you, it's just shared in the chat group right now. So there's 2 dockets and there's an opportunity for public comment that's due November 2nd. And anything would help, just to say that you care about shared solar and that you think solar should be accessible for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. And then finally, Tyson, did you have anything that you wanted to follow up with in terms of the calls to action that you wanted our folks to hear about?
Well, I think that I don't necessarily have a very specific one, as mentioned before, but I would say that we really do have this opportunity in front of us to help. We hear Monty's story. I mean, that really is compelling, and to hear the enthusiasm for also the continuation and the growth within that job. And I think that we really have to acknowledge the fact that we are just getting momentum going, and we've gone from 600 a couple years ago to 800 megawatts, and we're talking about now going to 10, 15, 16,000 megawatts in the years to come. There's a lot of work to do. Again, we as the industry, we've got a responsibility to deliver these projects, with the right stakeholder inputs, the right environmental safeguards and protections. But as a community collectively, I think that we do need to make sure that we're also locally in our communities talking about the benefits of this industry, so that people who are making local decisions around projects can understand there really is not just the environmental side, but the economic development side and opportunity. Just hearing about the comments in Southwest Virginia and the opportunities are there, and my family coming from that area, I completely agree. I mean, there's so much that we can do to help impact rural Virginia positively, and folks just getting that message out in their communities, I think, is my only call to action.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Here in the last 15 minutes, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, we're just going to go quickly through some of the comments and questions that were submitted to us here on the call. I will just call out whoever I'm going to be asking it of, and if you just unmute and answer however you want to, that would be fine. My first question is for Hillary. Given that the VCEA actually has only a few protections for workers in renewables, how can we make sure that the Green New Deal sets up strong provisions for workers and also balances ratepayer costs?
I think it's an interesting combination you put together with the ratepayer costs sort of you tagged on there. And I think it's really important that with Virginia being a right to work state, I do think, and this comes back to our ability to form unions and part of that health and safety. And that's actually something that I think we can potentially, take on changing, so that unions, I would argue, have some of the best health and safety programs that exist. And in doing some of these jobs, it's certainly at heights out on the water, that health and safety is so critical. So I have to think exactly about what that leverage looked like, but I think there's definitely that opportunity to be able to shift the politics of forming unions that can really help with that health and safety.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Moving on to Eileen, we have a question. How does offshore wind transport the power it creates back to the grid? Is the protocol to just lay wires on the seafloor back to substations?
Yeah, it's the cables coming back. They're actually buried a little bit under the ground. They're not just laid on the surface of the seafloor, but they are buried. And yes, they are coming in. They are coming in at Camp Pendleton in Virginia Beach is where Dominion is bringing in their power, and they do have a substation there. I didn't mention, and I feel bad I'm not doing this, but there is a project off of North Carolina, Kitty Hawk, which is really only about 25, 27 miles from our Virginia project to this Kitty Hawk project. That project is being developed by Avangard Renewables, and they are bringing that power on to the grid via Virginia. So they'll be coming into Virginia Beach. They're actually coming into, I think, a little bit further south than there. But yeah, so Dominion's coming into Camp Pendleton and Virginia Beach and Avangrid as well with the North Carolina project.
All right, thank you so much. This next question is for Ivy Main. It comes from one of our leaders here within the Green New Deal Coalition. The Richmond Times-Dispatch reported recently that the VCEA included a $2.5 billion rate increase for Dominion Energy on the wind project alone. Why did VCEA supporters give that project to Dominion, and why did they include this rate gouging provision? Also, does the in the public interest give Dominion and co-ops too much power in their own cost recovery process?
There's really three questions there. One, why does Dominion have it? Because Dominion bought the lease. So the federal government put the lease area up for auction back in 2013, I think. Dominion bought it. That kind of ties everybody's hands. If anybody's going to develop that lease area, it's going to be Dominion. We actually advocated to the federal government that they should split the area to develop some competition. Didn't happen. The provisions, yeah, a lot of us were not happy with the cost protections for offshore wind. What it does is say that the costs are acceptable if they don't exceed 1.4 times the levelized cost of energy from a gas peaker plant. And my take on that is you're comparing apples to Cheetos. I mean, they have nothing to do with each other, and we ought to be capping it at something like what all the other projects on the East Coast cost. We should be comparing apples to apples. And I don't think we're done with this issue yet. I think there's a fair amount of concern about Dominion getting too much. There are other cost protections, and I got to say the Northam administration has been doing a really good job in attracting local supply chain and manufacturing that'll help bring the cost down. But there's this concern if you let Dominion lard up the costs, that they don't have an incentive to keep them down. The question on in the public interest is an interesting one. Yes, it puts a thumb on the scale at the SCC, and that can be, if it's not. We hope it doesn't mean you have to approve anything that's in the public interest. But it's interesting that the Dominion's pump storage project turns out to be this huge boondoggle. It's going to be very expensive if they go forward, and if it has the same in the public interest language. If that means that the SCC can't deny it, even though the price has spiraled out of control, then we need to change that law too.
Okay.
Can I quickly add in here? I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Dominion's $7.8 billion price tag on the offshore wind, that's all based on it being European parts and European labor. So just, definitely keep that in mind. As I mentioned, those prices will come down dramatically as this becomes domestic supply and domestic parts and domestic labor.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that as well, Eileen. This next question is for Aaron. Does Dominion feel that the distributed generation businesses compete with them?
Yeah, it's hard to speak on behalf of Dominion because sometimes I'm not always aligned with them. I would say it depends on who you speak to in Dominion. And I will tell you that there's a lot of really intelligent people that specifically work in grid integration. I'll name somebody like Derek Wanger, who is taking the lead on a lot of the pilot projects in which they are trying to value distributed generation on the grid and integrate it in a way that it gives a value stream to the owner and the host, as well as all ratepayers. And a good example is if you can reduce peak demand, during high stress times in the summer when everybody's got their air cranked up, that really reduces costs for all ratepayers because the marginal cost of building a new power plant is usually to accommodate those peak times. And so people like Derek and his team are really working to integrate kind of consumer distributed generation in a way that complements those load profiles, but also can give a value stream to the host. Now, if you were to talk to people at Dominion that are heavily vested in generation, specifically some of the coal and the fossil generation, I think they might have a different viewpoint. But it's also, we're at a really interesting crossroads. And so I guess that's my best way of trying to summarize their viewpoint on that.
All right, thank you so much. This next question was sent into us before the call by one of our working group leads, who I think is on with us right now. But this one is for Tyson and Hannah. The president and CEO of your company, Mark Goodwin, sits on the board of directors of Advanced Energy Economy, the lobbying outfit which was instrumental in drafting of the language for and in the passage of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. The VCEA, many of us will unhappily recall, was used to thwart the bill that on which we all worked on, which was the Green New Deal Act. The VCEA also recently made news for its giveaway of billions of dollars to Dominion Energy. So his question was, why do you feel that it is appropriate that you sit on this panel?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair question. I think that we have seen that there is absolutely a lot of room for continued debate and discussion in this space. We're not talking about one single technology, one single approach. This is a community of different technologies and a lot of different interests. Trying to figure out and tackle what is one of the most daunting challenges that we face in climate change. To address the question specifically, I do think that we as Apex, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, we are very mission driven. Our mission is to accelerate the shift to clean energy. And we do that really from an environmental core. But we know that that's not something that we achieve overnight. Specific to the VCA, the Green New Deal, the discussions, that we've seen through this past legislative session, and then thinking even further back, it's been a progression. I can think towards how we've gone from a state that had no goals at one point to then a voluntary RPS program that really was offering up incentives or carrots for compliance. That's now the VCA. I don't think that the story is finished at this point. I think there's going to be more evolution, in the policy front, and I think that it's hard to even guess exactly what that will look like. But I do know that for us as Apex, we feel it is important to be engaged at, a whole host of industry groups, that are engaged in the industry. And, we want to make sure that our perspectives are shared there and voiced. But at the end of the day, we are pushing towards, trying to have as much deployment of these technologies as possible. And really, as we said in our mission, accelerate that shift to clean energy as quickly as possible.
Thanks. I couldn't say it any better, Tyson. Since this was directed at both of us, I figured I'd chime in as well. I don't think I caught his name, but I just wanted to say I hope he heard the first part too about, Tyson and I, we have dedicated our careers to this work and addressing climate change through accelerating the shift to renewable energy. And like all renewable energy professionals out here, I think we're very qualified to talk about the business and our roles in it. And I hope also he was able to hear what I had to say about the Clean Energy Advisory Board and the work there and the work in Southwest Virginia as well. Thank you.
Thank you both for your comments there. Obviously, we wanted to have everybody give different perspectives from where they're coming from. So thank you both for participating. Here in the last 3 minutes, I just want to briefly go over all the things that we sort of talked about here and what our next steps are. Obviously, the immediate things that we've been talking about, and Hannah had said that you can go and make comments to the SCC. I also got a note from someone said that there is a chance for people to record public comments via phone at the SCC hearing tomorrow, which is at 9:30 in response to Dominion's integrated resource rebuttal. That I will happily drop that form in the chat so that everybody can get that as well. But obviously the next steps after here are going and advocating for all these issues that we have been talking about for the past hour and a half here. With what the Green New Deal is here in Virginia, it's the intersectionality of all of these issues. We've been talking, a lot about the job creations and how that, and obviously with that job creation comes the economic justice that it gives back to the folks, especially in disadvantaged areas, communities of color, indigenous communities, also, rural communities down in Southwest Virginia, for instance, that don't have the same resources that folks in Northern Virginia may have. So all of these things are connected, and we're very headstrong on making sure that we are going to be putting out a great legislative agenda here coming up in the 2021 legislative session starting in January. I hope that everybody on here will advocate for the policies that we're putting forward and which should be coming down the line here in the next couple of weeks. And I want to thank all of our panelists for getting on a Wednesday night and talking about their perspectives on where we're at in the renewable energy sector and how that pertains to job creation here in Virginia. And I want to thank everybody who is either on here on Zoom or watching on Facebook and who gave us questions for our panelists. So thank you, everyone. And I will turn it over to our tech folks to close this out here. So thank you, everybody.